Who is moving up the most in the rankings this summer? That and more this week on the couch. The great Denny Carter. Denny, who's been moving up your ranks the most this summer?
Besides you, Sig, I would say, look, I think all of the Bears, all right. I know this sounds funny, but I feel like overall fantasy managers are a little surprised at how good Caleb Williams is and has been in the preseason. Now, the stats, haven't been there. I talked with Pat Doherty about this on the Roto World Football Show the other day. 50% completion rate, not a lot going on in the stat department. But if you're seeing him play, you understand what's happening. You're understanding a player who has like a sixth sense about, what's going on in the field. And that trickles down to everybody, to his pass catchers, to his running back, to everybody. That's very helpful. That boosts everybody. So when you talk to, you asked me who I'm higher on, I guess I definitely say Rome Odunze. I've warmed up to him big time. DJ Moore, I'm now fine with taking ADP. Before I was a little bit hesitant. Keenan Allen, maybe, he's looking a little older, maybe a little heavier, who knows. But I just think overall the Bears is a team that I just want to get pieces of all the time.
Yeah, I like leading with that because, well, first of all, and you tell me if you disagree, it feels like there's less and less to react to in the preseason and training camp than there's ever been before.
I think so, because coaches are so careful with what they say and do. And you Mike McDaniel, I pour over his press conferences in trying to write stuff for Roto World, and he says nothing. He says nothing about Tyreek Hill. He says nothing about Waddle or Mostert or anything. And so they become very savvy, these coaches, with how they handle the press. And so, yeah, I think you're right. We have less to work with.
And they're not showing as much in practice. They're not playing the players as much in the preseason. It seems like it's absorbed into the collective intelligence of the NFL that it's really not worth it to expose players in the preseason if you can help it. I mean, just knock off some rust or something, probably just up to the players, like it used to be for the choice veterans back in the day. But rookies, we always have a lot to react on the rookie front. And then, like you're talking about, some of the downstream effects. And we start with the quarterbacks, and we can start with Caleb Williams. And I guess just Denny, just looking at your face and knowing that I'm talking to you right now makes me want to wander off the reservation together, of course. I mean, because one of the neat things about Caleb Williams is he's different. I've been saying on my show for a while that I feel like he's the first post-player empowerment era quarterback, where he already has taken control of his destiny before he got to the NFL. Yeah. He already had a sense of that, which I think some in the NFL were turned off by, obviously not the Bears. And I think that, like you said, he's going to have a transformative effect, Cam Newton kind of effect on this team, not just for fantasy and the trickle down of fantasy. I always like to also talk about how teams are families, which, that has a lot of different connotations depending on your experience of family in your life. But there are families, dysfunctional families, functional families, mass consciousness organisms, and they're taking their signals from Caleb Williams now. And you mentioned Rome Odunze, and I think Rome Odunze might be my answer to the question of who's rising up the board the fastest. And I put it out there a few weeks ago, like, why are we treating Rome Odunze so different from Marvin Harrison and Malik Nabers?
Yeah.
When all the draft people said they're a trio, any one of them could have been the number one pick and number one receiver in a lot of drafts, and they just happened to all come along in this draft.
Right.
And then, you mentioned Keenan Allen. Well, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Odunze's going to have to wait. Sachin Waldron, the parallels are too much. But whenever they posted that they were on the same flight to the draft, here's Mayor of Narrative Street alert.
Okay.
I felt like that could have significance.
Yeah, sure.
That could have significance.
You file that away.
Right. And then you see the chemistry, and you start to feel like, okay, there's something here. And Odunze, so I'm feeling like Odunze is a player that you might reserve a pick for, maybe even as high as the 5th round. Of course, I could say the same thing about Xavier Worthy. I like to get excited about rookies. Are you getting excited about rookies?
Well, generally rookies are undervalued by fantasy drafters. And I'm not talking about folks who have been drafting best ball teams since March. Okay. Yeah. I'm talking about well-adjusted people who are, who who are drafting in their home leagues or whatever. Okay, so like generally, because you haven't seen them play in the NFL, you're going to naturally say, I don't know about this guy. I haven't seen it. So yeah, I mean, I do think you're right. I do, just real quickly, Sig, I
Mhm.
do want to say that this is the only fantasy football podcast where you will hear the term mass consciousness organisms.
It shouldn't be.
This it.
Yeah.
This is the list. This is the list of podcasts where you hear that
Yeah.
term, and
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Hey,
Uh,
we're only 5 minutes in. We're gonna get it
I'm
over.
gonna be googling that immediately after our podcast here.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, yeah. So I do think, yeah, Odunze in another draft class is going as the first receiver off the board, and he's going to be drafted as such, right? And I think, you know, this thing where you say, well, the veterans are in front of him. That's true for now, but I think, you know, I think he's the kind of player who can force his way into more playing time. You know, maybe he starts the season with like a 50 or 60% route share, right? That's not
Mhm.
great. We can maybe work with that. But maybe he makes some plays, he gets up to 75% and then 80%. And then he starts starting in two receiver sets for the Bears. I can see that happening. And people say, well, it didn't happen with JSN. To me, that doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. The Seahawks didn't run many three receiver sets last year. I think the Bears, you know, will run, you know, maybe middle of the pack, maybe top 15 or so in three receiver sets. That's good for Odunze.
Well, the name that comes up too, Denny, is Tank Dell, right? And it isn't as narrative street gift wrapped as CJ Stroud asked the team to draft Tank Dell. But again, I'm going to put the flight out there. And also, you're just seeing like the one signature play so far in the preseason where Caleb Williams just knows, you get a sense that he already knows where the hot zone is for
Yes.
Odunze,
Yes.
and whether it's the red zone or downfield passing. And again, I just want to take a step back and say, because like you said, people are a little more skeptical about rookies. And maybe if you want to expand this and scale this out, probably as we go through from the draft all the way to say week 4, 5, 6, the biggest exploitable advantage in fantasy football is being willing to accept what the new reality when other people are saying, I need more evidence. I need more
Yes.
evidence. And
Uh-huh.
with rookies, everyone needs evidence on rookies, right? It's not how it used to be. But I think that that's why there's advantages to exploit. Even Malik Nabers. What do you think about Nabers? Because there's been a little bit of, here we go again, mass hysteria, which might be a good thing because it
Uh-huh.
might be an indicator. It might be something to you. Maybe you should get pulled in. I think if you want Malik Nabers, you need to take him in the second round at this point. He may still be around for you in the third round, but he's a second round pick. But he could instantly, once the lights get turned on, even with Daniel Jones, he could be a first round value and more valuable than Harrison. Or am I crazy?
I'm being very aggressive with the way I approach Neighbors. I don't really like to miss out on him, so I will reach, you know, because I think that, look, he has no meaningful target competition in that offense. And yes, it would be cool if he had a competent quarterback throwing him the ball. You know, we all want that. Maybe he'll get that one day. He doesn't have that, but I think that's okay when you're talking about a rookie who really, I think he really could see somewhere around a 30% target
Yeah.
share in this Giants
180,
offense.
190.
Yes. No, truly. Like I said this, I said this to Pat on the Roto World show the other day. He immediately shut me down. He told the producer to cut my mic. I said, look, I think Malik Nabers could lead the NFL in targets. I think that
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
the sort of upside he has because they're just going to funnel him targets, and a lot of them are going to be short area stuff. You know, it's not going to be downfield stuff. That's not what Daniel Jones does, right? But short area stuff, and who can be better with that kind of opportunity than Neighbors, who is so good after the catch?
Yeah, he came in with a complete game already, and with physical gifts on top of
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And you mentioned parsing Mike McDaniel's press conferences, and I think I wanted to do a shout out to Greg over at Coach Speak Index, who I had on. I
Mm.
don't know, sometime earlier in the summer. He's doing that for us full time, and much like on the couch, he even has his psychological makeups of each coach to contextualize everything
Nice.
that they
Yeah,
say. It's fantastic.
yeah.
And coach speak, we often think about coach speak, and I've thrown out there someone needs to do player speak index too, because we can look back at players talking about other players, especially rookies,
Hmm.
and then I would also say players on other teams, and then I'm going to go pull this all together and see Robert Saleh. I don't know if you saw what Robert Saleh was saying about Nabers.
No, I didn't. What did he say?
He just, I mean, I'm paraphrasing. I don't know exactly what he said, but
Yeah.
basically, like, he's a special player. He's somebody that they really have to prepare for.
Okay.
You don't hear that a lot in the preseason. You
Yeah.
don't hear, and we also heard from different people covering the Giants, like, this is a Malik Nabers offense.
Mm.
Okay, like this offense is coming in, and it's no disrespect to Marvin Harrison Jr.,
Mhm.
but we're not quite hearing the same things. I mean, it's a Kyler Murray offense in Arizona, right?
Yeah.
This is we're hearing this. He is the foundational player that Malik Nabers is making that. I would almost say, tell me if you think this passes the crazy test. If you're on the board in the mid-second and Harrison and Nabers are both there,
Yeah.
are you taking Nabers?
I am. I am taking Nabers, and it's nothing against Harrison. I'm just talking from a fantasy football standpoint. I think Nabers could be very fun because of the way that he operates, and the modern NFL is very friendly, fantasy friendly for a guy who gets short area targets in the middle of the field. I think that's what he'll see a lot this year. Marvin Harrison, I believe, will be almost exclusively on the boundary.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really what I'm looking for, in a high draft pick. I want the short stuff. I want the PPR scammy stuff underneath.
Right.
And I think Nabers gets that. Will get that more than Harrison. Now, I will say, so in normie ADP, okay, Nabers is going as wide receiver 23 right now.
Yeah.
There's zero. To me, look, without an injury, there's no chance that he's going to finish outside of wide receiver 20. Okay.
Right.
And has every chance to finish inside of wide receiver 10. I mean, I would take him over Michael. These are guys who are going before him. Okay. I take him over Pittman. I take him over Diggs, over Kupp, over Ayuk, over Evans, over Olave. That's the sort of aggressiveness I'm talking about with targeting Nabers.
Yeah. It sure seems like in the home league, the third round, this is why folks should switch to auction, right? Because you can actually have 3 third-round picks in auction drafts. Right. Kupp, you mentioned Kupp. Kupp is a third-round pick. That's another one I think that was a very quick correction for me. I wasn't necessarily in on Kupp being a late third-round pick, but I understand, again, skepticism. Once observers were saying he's just good old Cooper Kupp again, it's just like, then I'm not. I think this year in general, and if I ever have time, I'm going to try to write a quick article about it. I feel like overweighting of age and injury concern is one of the other edges you can exploit for whatever reason. As I put the fantasy football community down on the couch, it seems like Raheem Mostert, I think, is another good one where I get it. There should be a discount. Cooper Kupp in the second round is a discount. Cooper Kupp was a top 5 pick before he got hurt. So even if you're adding in Puka Nacua, which can help Cooper Kupp in theory, also, if you're getting Cooper Kupp in the second round, that's a discount. In the third round, it seems like an overreaction. So it's tough, but I think you're right that in your home league, reserving that third round pick for Nabers, he just has the buzz.
Yeah, he does. He does, and I just think volume wise, it could be kind of silly for Nabers at times. Like where it could be like, well, he saw 12 targets last week, and this week he's up to 14, and we're entering the fourth quarter. That sort of thing.
Yeah, his quarterback play is going to be at least better than what Devontae Adams is going to get, because you can make the same argument for Adams. I think you take Nabers over Adams, and I think that.
Yeah, I think so actually.
Well, because why do you ever want to take a wide receiver on a team where the starting quarterback backed into the job? And you might make that same argument for Daniel Jones, but I think that another reason that we might like Nabers a little bit better than our worst case scenario expectation, and I guess again the other one would be maybe Garrett Wilson, but again, Daniel Jones and Drew Lock, I mean, they're not Zach Wilson. All right, this is not that kind of nightmare hellish.
No, it's not.
Place. And Brian Dable's calling plays again. Brian Dable's taking the reins back on the offense, so hopefully it'll be better than last year. But Nabers absolutely gets pulled in. I mentioned I'm going to toss out a couple of other rookie names. Whether it's worth it to get caught up in the hype. Is it worth it to get caught up in the hype for Brian Thomas, who's done a total 180? There's a bunch of people, because I put out there, I think you probably know John Shipley. John Shipley's awesome, and he put out there that, hey, Ronald Darby is just smothering Brian Thomas before the pads went on, and some people got in my mentions, which is I appreciate that because it keeps me honest. Well, what I mean is it was football based.
Yeah,
Thankfully, not a lot of the ad hominem attacks these days. But I'm in my old age. I'm laying low. I'm
same, man.
dog.
Same. I'm too old for that stuff.
Yeah, I just don't have the time, honestly. Who ain't nobody got no time for that. But Brian Thomas has done a total 180 in terms of his camp already. It's kind of like Jamar Chase, but he didn't have to wait until regular season to turn it on. And then Xavier Worthy had reminiscent of Tyreek Hill.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I moved Tyreek Hill up to like the top 5 when it was that preseason before Patrick Mahomes had just played the last game of the year, and then it was the preseason before his second year, and I want to say it was like double or triple coverage on Hill, and he just ran past them all.
It was against the Falcons. I remember that.
Yeah.
And he threw it 65 yards in the air, and Hill was wide open. And actually, Sig, I had the same reaction. I said, well, I have to get Tyreek Hill on every single team this year. And remember, he was going in like the 3rd round.
Right. So Worthy, again, 5th round maybe, Odunze, Worthy, these are guys. And one of the things I want to stress as we're getting closer and closer to the first hill in the roller coaster, we're just on that click, click, click draft part, is all kinds of stuff that we're attached to right now. Again, don't wait for more evidence. Let it go. Be frozen. Be willing to let it all go. Week 1, week 2, the people who will prosper, will flourish. I almost made up a new word, flourish or flosh fleur. Those people be the ones who were quickest to let go of their priors when presented with new evidence. So a 5th round pick for Odunze, a 5th round pick for Worthy. Oh, that's a reach. A week or 2 into the season, we might say that's a great value. Yeah. 2nd round pick for Nabers, we might say that's a great value. Are you getting excited? Is it worth it to get excited, get caught up in the hype about Worthy, who had that play, getting behind the defense with Mahomes, and Brian Thomas?
Look, I unfortunately staked out a position on the Worthy thing where I said, it doesn't matter if Worthy is fast. The defenses playing the Chiefs are not going to change. They're going to keep 2 safeties 35 yards off the line of scrimmage, and they're going to force Mahomes to go underneath. I think what happened is I did not anticipate that Worthy is the fastest guy of all time. And so you see him blow by defenders in the preseason, and it is, you like you said, Sig, like to change your take, to not have take lock is important this time of year. And so I saw that and I said, I'm wrong. I'm completely wrong. And this is going to be fun for fantasy. I don't think it's going to be a Tyreek situation, but I think that Worthy makes a lot of sense in the 5th round. I think that it's clear that he's not going to be treated like Rashee Rice was last year because, and what I mean, I don't mean usage. Of course, Rice is going to be the underneath guy, but Rice, we couldn't get a good route rate out of that guy until like week 14 or something. Okay. I don't think that's going to be the case with Worthy. I think Worthy's going to see a lot of playing time, a lot of snaps, a lot of routes. And so he's not going to be dependent on just like one splash play. I think that he'll get a fair amount of opportunity. And a guy like that, he can blow the roof off with a fair amount of opportunity.
Yeah. I put out there with the play, and I get it. See, this is that whole thing. Yes, you should overreact to preseason plays, or at least in hindsight, it was correct. Every year, it was correct to overreact to a few, and it was also incorrect to overreact and go along with the indicator of a few. But Worthy, was it a false start? It was lying. You can just see, as you said, that defenders are not going to be ready for his acceleration. It's this combination of playing fast and under control. Nabers has it too. There's just not many receivers that can do that. And the other thing is, you mentioned the idea that, hey, the Chiefs are still going to be defended, even if it's death by 1,000 paper cuts, right. That they're going to force Mahomes to be more disciplined. But I also think here comes Narrative Street again. Can't you see, and this is wild, because the Chiefs' offense is coming off of an embarrassing down year, a frustrating year for them. I mean, it was not fun to be part of that offense last year. Frustrating. And they won the Super Bowl.
It seems unfair.
But can't you see them on a revenge tour Can't you see?
Right.
I'm not saying to exactly the same level of numbers of the Moss Welker Patriots, but just that kind of attitude towards the defense when they
Yeah.
get in the building, like you said, blow the doors off, and go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree. Look, they're going to say, hey, everybody keeps pointing out that we had a worse offensive EPA than the Jaguars. No, I'm kidding. Of course,
Ha!
no one on the Chiefs knows that, but I do think that that's definitely in the cards. And Mahomes seems mad. I remember we used to react to Mad Brady every time Brady got mad. That was the narrative. Well, I think we have Mad Mahomes now,
Yeah,
and I think that he kind of could go off. I think that his ADP is such that if you really believe this, that he is mad and they are
yeah.
going to put up a lot of points. I think that he makes for a really good pick
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
redraft leagues because it's not. This is not the old days. Like Mahomes is not. He's not going in the second or third round anymore like he was 3 or 4 years ago. You can get him pretty late, especially if your league fades quarterbacks. I
Right.
mean, you could, in industry leagues, you probably get Mahomes in like the eighth or ninth round. It's crazy.
It is crazy. And I do think you can see the fantasy community already anticipating this or bracing for it because he's still overall, I think, quarterback 3, even though I don't know what he was last year, quarterback 10, quarterback worthless, quarterback that at a certain point you were
Yeah,
wondering, should I be putting Patrick Mahomes on my bench? That's how his fantasy performance was last year. And the fantasy community is bought in enough that he's back up at quarterback 3. And this is where know you're scoring in lineups, know you're scoring in lineups, know you're scoring in lineups. If it's 6-point pass touchdowns, if it's long touchdown
yeah,
bonuses,
yeah.
if it's 300-yard bonuses, if it's passing heavy scoring systems, Mahomes could easily be QB1. And you're right that he could be an easy flag plant player. Uh, uh, it can be players who've changed over the summer, but in the flag plant, shout out to Evan Silva. What's up, big dog? Um, who's another Denny Carter flag plant? Whether you've been there all along or you just showed up.
I liked when Cooper Kupp was going a little later than he is today because I was all over him in early drafts in best ball back in the spring when he was going significantly. I think 23, 25 picks after Puka. And, because we had a Rams beat writer on the Roto World show a few weeks ago. And we asked him, like, what is the pecking order here with the Rams receivers? And he outright said, there is no, we don't know. Like, there is no pecking order. It's a 1A, 1B situation. And I don't know who is the 1A going into the season. I think it could be Kupp. Now, I'm not saying that Puka's like undraftable, but I think that you are paying up for Puka's ceiling and you're drafting Kupp maybe, near his floor, really. Especially because, as you remember, I'm sure Kupp was used as like the Rams' main red zone threat back in 2021, and they kind of got back to that a little bit when he was healthy last year, where the whole plan seemed to be let's get Cooper open in the red zone near the goal line. So I think that he has touchdown upside that we're not baking into his ADP.
Yeah, a lot of upside. That's just the whole Rams offense seems like it's being underestimated.
I
Assuming,
agree.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So three offenses I think are being underestimated.
Hmm.
Bears, like I said,
Yeah.
Rams to an extent. And then, I mean, not that I'm like hungry to draft Stafford or anything, but I think the Rams in general. I think the Dolphins are being underestimated. And you say, well, how can that be? Because you have Tyreek going as a top 3 pick. You have Jaylen Waddle going as what is Waddle going as? Wide receiver 19. Okay. And then Tua going much later. And then Achane going in the second or third
Hmm.
round. So
Hmm.
what do you? What I mean is this: look, the Dolphins fans don't like to hear this. I get it. They lost a lot of defensive talent in the offseason. They had the luxury of tons and tons of positive game script last year where they could run the ball, kind of take the air out of the ball. I think a lot of that goes away this year. They're going to be forced to pass more, forced to drop back more. And Sig, we have skinny Tua
Hmm.
under center.
Hmm. Hmm.
He's mobile, and Mike McDaniel talked about this just this week. He said, "Look, he's doing things that he was not able to do last year. He's getting outside the pocket. He's avoiding rushers. He's making something out of nothing, which is something he literally could not do last season. He dropped a bunch of weight. He looks totally different. I watched him against Washington this past week, and I was very impressed. he didn't look like the same guy from last year. So I think that weight loss thing for him and the fact that the Dolphins defense might be worse could open up this offense to score a ton of points this year.
Yeah, this is a really fun. I continue, Denny. The longer I do this, well, first of all, the first way my brain fills in that blank is the longer I do this, the more willing I am to listen to other people and
Yeah.
substitute other people's judgment for my judgment. And I don't
Right.
think that my judgment is the end all be all, just my judgment and which judgment to listen to, often not my own. But the more I do this, I continue to circle back to it's about offenses. It's about offenses more than it's about players.
Yeah.
And we think of fantasy football as individual players. We assign achievements to individual players, but really it's always team achievements. I always like to bring up this thought experiment. Like what statistic is truly an individual statistic in the NFL? Like the only thing I come up with is like holding penalties, uh,
Yeah.
right?
That's it.
What statistic is not a intersection, a conjunction of different players' efforts and coaches? And you bring up Mike McDaniel. I love bringing up Mike McDaniel because I like to say he's the closest thing there is to if one of us got to be an
Oh
NFL
yeah.
head coach.
Yeah, he's a big nerd. Yeah.
He approaches it the game that it is, and I think we learned last year that he's never going to just sit back and assume what worked last year is going to work this
Mm-hmm.
year. And I think he's always going to be one step ahead, and he's always going to force defensive coaches to react to what he's doing instead of finding out that they caught up, like Greg Roman. Oh, they caught up. Now I need to have a counter puncher a second. I don't have anything. He's already anticipating that. Johnny Smith, I think, is an exciting player on this front.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Um,
Malik Washington.
Sure. And I like Washington. Unfortunately, I can't remember who it was. One of the Dolphins beat writers said that it was down to him or Eric Ezukama, who's like Dollar General Debo Samuel for the
Yeah.
last Ross. But I agree with you that Malik Washington's a player to watch down the line. And if Odell Beckham really isn't ready to start the season, then he could be interesting because if he stepped in for Waddle, who praised the football gods, I think it was back at practice today.
He
After
was, yes.
it's the annual tradition of the Jaylen Waddle mystery
Yeah,
absence.
man, he's always hurt somehow. Yeah, it's true.
And that's why it's so exciting to take him, right? As we think, because we saw him healthy as a rookie and piled up targets. Basically, he was Jarvis Landry. I forget who it was that said that they turned him into Jarvis Landry. Brian Flores, whose name was in the news lately because of what Tua had to say about.
Yeah.
At least Flo said I wanted to learn from that. But
that is good. Good to hear. I also commend Tua for surviving that situation because a lot of guys would completely fold. I mean, it seemed like Flores was actively trying to undermine Tua's career, and
right.
he got through it. I think that shows a strength and kind of makes me a fan of Tua.
Oh yeah, I was a fan of Tua. Also, Tua is a really interesting figure as an NFL quarterback. I think he's completely unique in terms of his personality, his vibes,
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'd read that his dad turned him into a left-hander. Am I remembering that correctly? That I don't think that he's a natural southpaw. But what that tells me, he is malleable, or he's impressionable. He's not this raw, like he's not Caleb Williams. He's not this guy that has such an incredible sense of grabbing the tiger by the tail, being in control of his destiny. And even the arc of his college career also, he and Jalen Hurts have really interesting intertwined destinies, and how both of them in the end have to believe in themselves or they never would have gotten here. Like the football gods of the universe have tried to tell them multiple times, like, maybe this isn't in the cards for you.
Right.
And they said, no, it is. But in a way that's not showy or not, they're not Tom Brady, like a personality brand.
Exactly. Yes.
And
I agree with you. They're not the prototype of the quarterback, of the leadership quarterback guy. Yeah, no,
absolutely. But it makes McDaniel and Tua such an interesting combination. But I come back to offenses, and I think maybe the most important thing in your fantasy draft is to predict which offenses are going to create the most overall fantasy production. And Miami has to be first. It has to be because of how they create space and defenses like no offense has yet. And
yes. Right. I mean, you're right. I mean, McDaniel treats football like a game, which imagine that. Imagine a coach doing that. But it really endears him to us, to folks who see him as have a kinship with him because of that approach to the game. So we appreciate that. We love our Mike McDaniel. But I will say, yeah, I mean, I think one thing drafters can do if you're having your fantasy draft this coming weekend or whatever, look at offenses that you think are being underrated, undervalued, just overall. So like I talked
Mhm.
about Miami, the Bears, the Rams to an extent. I mean, if you think maybe you think the Titans are
Yeah.
underrated,
Yep.
okay, with Callahan in charge now and Vrabel out of the picture, so they're actually going to throw the ball a little bit. Maybe so make that decision, make that bet. It's just we're making little bets throughout the
Yep.
draft. And so if you're making a bet that Tennessee's going to be pretty good on offense and throw the ball more than folks think, then you're taking Calvin Ridley at ADP. Okay, then
Right.
maybe take Will Levis in Superflex. Like you really just need to make that decision for yourself. And I think that you'll come away from your draft feeling a little better than usual.
Yeah, a good actionable way I would package this up, Denny, is just when you're on the clock and you're feeling conflicted, just think about the offenses, or even better, think about the play caller.
Yeah, yeah.
Who I don't understand why we don't consider this more whenever we're making decisions in fantasy football, waiver wire pickups and things like that. Like, just which organization do you trust to get the most out of players?
Mm-hmm.
Set players up to succeed, set offenses up to succeed. And I think that list, and these can be offenses, Denny, that are underrated, not because we don't think they're good, but we don't realize that maybe they could take things to an historic level this year, right?
Right.
We always have to be open to things that haven't happened before happening. I mean, if you haven't gotten out about playing fantasy football lately, then
Yeah.
you're missing the whole point. And I think Miami's on that list. Baltimore with Derrick Henry. I mean, that's no one should be surprised if that offense goes nuclear with that addition,
Yeah.
right?
I agree.
Detroit, of course, Detroit. Of course, Detroit.
I
Can I just
mean,
say, go ahead.
I will say that if you're this test has made me run through some teams in my head as you're talking, and the Jets pop up, and I
Yes,
wonder I
yes.
wonder do I trust the Jets? Do I trust that team to do the right thing with their players? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm very queasy about taking Garrett Wilson, about taking Brees Hall to an extent. Although maybe they're just too big to fail,
Right.
and I should just stop worrying and trust them.
Mhm.
But that Jets offense and that Jets organization and coaching staff, leaves a lot to be desired. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's Aaron Rodgers, right? Every Jets pick is you're really picking Aaron Rodgers. Even
Yes.
if it's not Aaron Rodgers, he's standing behind them. Like, it's all you're counting on Aaron Rodgers, except for maybe Brees Hall, because late last year Brees Hall was rivaling Christian McCaffrey's numbers
Hmm.
without Aaron Rodgers. So what could he do with Aaron Rodgers? But certainly Garrett Wilson, I think, is you're inherently drafting Aaron Rodgers. What I was thinking, Doctor Strangelove, Doctor Strange quarterback, how I learned to
Yeah,
stop
right.
worrying
That's what
and
I was
love.
trying to think of. Yeah.
Yeah, how I learned. See, everyone needs to go see if you haven't heard, watch Doctor Strangelove.
It's
Go
great.
the whole Cooper catalog. But the Jets are a good one. So I have another category. So really quickly, the elite offenses that could be even a leader than we thought: Miami, Baltimore, Detroit. We mentioned Kansas City, and maybe people aren't thinking of them as elite. They can get back to elite really fast, and of course San Francisco. But the Jets are in an interesting category where are we correctly pricing in the potential improvement? If it's just Aaron Rodgers, even if it's just Aaron Rodgers as the
Yeah.
captain of this ship with Nathaniel Hackett as his first mate, like Gilligan, that could be so much better than what we've seen. Like,
Hmm.
we may not realize just how bad it was. I wanted this to be a Steelers take, but I don't think it's in the cards for the
No,
Steelers
I
to
don't
really
know. I
improve
don't
that
think
much.
so.
But we may see just how bad it was. This is how bad it was
Yeah.
with the Jets. That if you just add Aaron Rodgers, I think Arizona belongs on that list. Tennessee, you mentioned, is a good one because they have a whole new philosophy, new attitude, right? The
Hmm.
Pointer
Hmm.
Sisters. Mentioned the Giants. Carolina's one. I mean, Carolina could move up from like Baltic Avenue, Mediterranean Avenue, to like
Yeah. Right.
maybe like those orange
To the
properties or
Yeah,
or
that's a big jump. I'd go with the baby blue
the
properties.
baby, oh yeah, Oriental. Oh, that's not the preferred nomenclature, dude.
No, no,
But
no.
yeah, you get it. I mean, it's still Carolina, and maybe Denver applies here too, where we're just pricing them as if they're going to continue to be one of the bottom two or three offenses. And
Yeah.
if they're just not in the bottom eight, there could be some values there. But I like that you're bringing up the Jets.
Yeah, and then so Deontay Johnson's going as wide receiver, still going as wide receiver
Hmm.
39, And I think that's why, because people are, we have to have an imagination
Yeah,
sometimes, and
always.
and right, always preferably, but sometimes definitely. And it does take a little bit of an imagination to be like, hey, this wide receiver one can do well with Bryce Young.
Hmm.
I do think he's being underdrafted by, I don't know, at least a round, maybe two.
Hmm.
Yeah, so you do have to use your imagination sometimes and say, if this goes right, what if I'm wrong? That's a question to ask yourself. What if
Hmm.
I'm wrong about the Panthers offense? What if they're not so abysmal this year, and that means Deontay Johnson is a reliable plug and play wide receiver 2 or 3? What if it means that Chuba Hubbard is
Yeah.
serviceable? Like what ifs are very important things to ask yourself.
Yeah, you got to be ready. I always bring up old Wayne Gretzky. You skate to where the puck's going to be, not
There
to
you
where it
go.
is.
There you go.
And I think that we we have to have our, again, I want to reference Big Lebowski. Our brains have to be limber, supple, and ready to accept what's happening, so that if indeed, because we already saw it with Adam Thielen last year. Andy Dalton showed Bryce Young the way, and I guess what it came out, and the stuff always comes out after they fail, like
Yeah,
that they
yeah.
they had two changes on offense, right? It was Reich's offense and then Brown's offense and then Reich's offense. In other words, not exactly conducive to success. And Dave Canales is,
No.
the third stop in 3 years, hopefully to create some success there. So yeah, we should be open to that. Deontay Johnson, if he stays healthy, catching 100 passes.
Yeah, it could happen. I mean, even a secondary guy like Adam Thielen could be somewhat interesting. Although I don't really know how Thielen fits with Johnson, and they seem to have the same kind of role. But yeah, I mean, you have to think. Well, what if I'm wrong? I'm trying to think of some other offenses that you could be wrong on. Maybe wrong on the other way. Maybe the Cowboys are a
Uh huh.
disappointment. And you're taking Ferguson, you're taking CeeDee Lamb and Dak, and you're thinking, well, it's just going to be like last year. What if it's not? What if the dysfunction has settled in to such an extent that it goes sideways quickly,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And those guys would be huge disasters for fantasy in that case. Although I do think, like I said, too big to fail. CD Lamb, I think, fits that description.
Yeah, I was going to ask you really quick, and then we'll go off the rails for the last couple of minutes. Some uncertainty at the top of drafts, right? Lamb's not practicing, Chase isn't practicing, Christian McCaffrey with a calf. Are those still are those players moving down on your board at all based on those things?
So who'd you mention? McCaffrey and who else?
Lamb,
Lamb.
Chase,
Yeah.
and McCaffrey.
Uh, the Lamb thing is very strange because it's like, well, when? Like he's missed all of training camp. Like when is this going to happen? And I feel like the history. I don't have like a document showing detailing this, but I feel like the history of players holding out all summer and then returning 10 minutes before week one is not good. So I that makes me a little bit reticent. Let's put it this way: I'm taking Tyreek Hill over CeeDee Lamb. I know
Ooh,
that
yeah,
maybe we're
yeah.
parsing things there, but I am taking Hill over Lamb. With McCaffrey, I don't worry too much. I think they're being all indications from beat writers for the Niners are the team is being very careful with CMC, getting him ready for week one. I do think it is interesting, though, just on a side note about the Niners, Jordan Mason really does seem to have eclipsed finally Elijah Mitchell for the RB2 role. So it looks like it would be Mason as the lead back if CMC misses time. So, folks should remember that when they're just, drafting bench running backs who could have a lot of upside later on. Remember that Mason tidbit because it could be very important.
Yeah, and it's easy to draft him, and then if Mitchell's healthy and they split the role, and Mason is just playing on special teams, you can drop him quickly. And
Right.
if McCaffrey aggravates his calf injury, cha-ching! I love players like that on my bench because
Yes. Oh,
you need to be able to move on with no remorse. Week
yeah.
2, week 3 waiver wire. Mason fits that.
It's part of the reason, zero RB works in some ways. In other ways, it can obviously it can fail. It makes your lineup very volatile. But I will say one way it works is so you don't end up with CMC, say, okay, because you're
Hmm.
you're doing zero RB, you're taking a bunch of receivers early, but you end up with Mason, right? So if CMC misses time, then you get to plug in the 49ers starting running
Right,
back along with 3 or 4 elite receivers, and your
right.
team is humming. at that point.
Right, right, and you have all season. This year more than any other year, 0 running back upside down drafting, do the opposite. It's set up for it because of the running back dead zone is now in the 6th, 7th, 8th
Mm,
round,
hmm.
and you don't have to fear they can't deplete the running back so that it won't work. I mean, you have to still hopefully pick the right ones. Raheem Mostert and
Yeah.
Dave Montgomery, but or whoever they are. Okay, let's go off the rails really quick. Really, I would love to. The whole show just should have been off the rails. And we're going to really do this on the couch, Denny, because
Okay.
as I mentioned before we started, I'm a fan. I'm a Denny Carter fan. I mean,
I'm a big.
just the fact that you've inspired so many I think that you got up all the parody accounts of all the fantasy football personalities, and you still have more than everybody else combined, which I think is a testament to how capable you are at projecting yourself into the online world. And you mentioned before we went on that, I think you're old enough that you didn't grow up online,
No,
right?
no.
How, how how did that work that you feel so comfortable, or maybe this is where you say I'm not actually comfortable online, and then how does that affect like just your conception of yourself, growing up as a person like in this earthly world,
Hmm.
and now, and this is really I'm asking myself this question at the
Yeah,
same
right.
time, but having like one foot in this online world, that's our bargain that we make with the larger society, so we're allowed to exist, but still hopefully one foot still touching grass and being here on earth.
It has its upsides and it definitely has its downsides. I have, my career comes from being online. I'm able to write and talk about football for a living because of that. And so for that, I'm very grateful. I've met a lot of really great people online over the years. I mean, it's like truly, I know it sounds kind of trite, but some of my best friends
Sure.
I have come from the fantasy football industry over the past 11 or 12 years. You can get lost. I have gotten lost in online before, and it's hard. It's easy to because it's so stimulating, right? And it just it tickles all the right parts of your
Mhm.
brain, and without it, at least I sort of kind of feel itchy, like I
Mhm.
need to go get that stimulation again, and I do recognize that downside. Trust me, touching grass, like you said, Sig, very important. I don't do it enough. I
Mhm.
need to touch more grass. But yeah, I mean, I think the parody stuff, just to address that real quick,
Mhm.
I think that comes from I have intense interests, okay? And if I'm into something, I am into something, okay? Which explains why, and you're probably the same way, because it explains why I made a hobby my living,
Mhm. Mhm.
and so I think as the years have rolled by, and as I've shown deep, crazy interest in certain things, these parodies have popped up to say, "Oh, this is the part of Denny who loves this one thing." Like there's a parody account of me loving corn. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
kidding. Corn. So and I do enjoy some corn. I didn't think of myself as a corn guy, but apparently somebody did. So yeah, I think that's where it comes from, and it is kind of a surreal thing to witness.
Well, it's something that we are the first generation that could speak about it. And we have a unique perspective because the people coming after us have just grown up online,
Hmm.
and that dual existence, it's just something that they're used to. To them, that's just what existence is. It doesn't seem like something different than what existence is to other people. But you're right. It's attention, it's stimulating. I often say that we're so self-indulgent because we
Oh
need attention, right?
yes, I'm
And we
so
get to do that,
self-indulgent.
right? And we get to do that for our job. All the people that are listening right now, all the people that subscribe to the sites and do all the
Yeah,
things to support what we do, you're so kind. Like people, fantasy analysts should always be nice to everybody because everybody's doing you a big favor. They're giving you something. Not you're not just getting paid. You're getting to feel relevant or getting to feel
yeah,
like
yeah.
Because I think this is a take that I trot out regularly. I mean, I still think that mostly fantasy football, and there's a lot of wonderful females in the fantasy football space, but fantasy football mostly came about and grew for men to be able to make friends and not feel lonely,
Hmm. Hmm.
basically.
I mean, there's
Um,
a male loneliness issue for sure.
yeah, yeah, it's a way to have a shared experience. It's a way to have a safe space.
It is a shared experience, and we don't get much of that these days. We
No,
don't get much. But the last shared experience remaining in society
yes,
is the football game.
that's why it drives television ratings. That's why
Yeah,
live TV, the only thing left that people care about on live TV. When as a kid, there was a monoculture. I mean, there were shared Who
yes,
Shot JR.
yes.
I can remember that. I think I was like 5 or 6 years old, and they did Who Shot JR on Dallas. There were these, or the Academy Awards, or even just watching the Olympics. I mean, the '84 Olympics, that was a cultural touchstone. Everybody, these were all these shared experiences. And it is good though that people are indulgent to us, and we try to be indulgent back. Go ahead.
I have tried to be nicer. Over the years I've tried to be nicer, and it is indulgent. I mean, but what are you supposed to do when you write stuff about football and a bunch of people say, "Hey, I like this. This is really good." It's
Yeah,
hard. It's hard to keep yourself in check sometimes. Although I will say, when I want to keep myself in check, I simply go to the YouTube comments and
yeah, yeah.
and immediately say, "Oh yeah, right. I forgot. I suck completely."
Right, right. Yeah, well, and I mean, we're there to have tomatoes thrown at us too. I mean, we're still jesters in the long
Yeah,
run,
yeah.
and that's
We
okay.
talked before the show. I think the best fantasy writers and podcasters and analysts, I think they do incorporate. I mean, and this is going to sound bad, but let me explain. They incorporate a little bit of shame
Sure.
into the game, and what I mean by that is there's an acknowledgement, an overriding acknowledgement that we are playing a game within a game, guys. Chris Wessling used
Rest in
to
peace. Yeah.
scream, yes, absolutely, it used to scream this from the mountaintops. He said, look,
Hmm.
you're playing fantasy football, relax. You're not, it's not that important,
Yeah.
folks. Like,
Yeah.
and that I really I took that message from Chris, and I tried to incorporate that into the way I approach everything in this industry.
Yeah, I just had Pete Overzet on for the first time, long overdue. I think he's mastered that, like making fun of himself while he's making fun of us, but in a together way. We're all laughing together at ourselves, and that's good. That's a relief. It's always a relief. And we mentioned Chris Wessling. I'll mention Mike Tagliere too. I know you said corn, that you're into corn. I don't even mean corn with a K
Oh
or
yes,
corn
the
with a
band,
C,
yeah.
but I'll mention Mike Tagliere too, because it is about the people we meet along the way, and I'm
Yeah,
so glad that along the way I've gotten to meet Denny Carter, and I've gotten to meet all of you, and I continue to get to meet more people because you all are all so indulgent. We love you all because you're
yes.
so classy.